Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, where we talk to amazing people doing incredible things that lead the charge of generosity. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is an odd duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, our guest is Ruth Ann Marley. Growing up in an atheist home at the age of 7 years old, Ruth Ann would sneak out of the house to go to Sunday school. She's always felt like a guiding hand has been leading her along her life's journey. She has always felt the need to create inclusion, do more, do better, and leave people and situations better than she found them. Living my best life every day is Ruth Ann's motto. She continues to better the pond every day at TEC Canada, but has also left her mark in Haiti, Colombia, the Dominican Republic, and other locations worldwide. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to introduce to you Ruth Ann Marley. Ruth Ann Marley, thank you ever so much for being a guest on my Better the Pond podcast. I am so excited to have you on today.
Warren, it's a delight. I am humbled by the invitation. And as you know, when you did reach out, I thought, oh, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. And my fear was a sign that I should do it. So thank you.
And I love the courage, right? And when you sent that to me, I thought that was fantastic. I thought that was one of the best replies I've heard. I mean, because when I knew that it scared me, I knew there was something I should do. So I love the courage and the bravery for you to step up to the plate. And because we did book it today, so we have to start off with May the 4th be with you.
And with you.
So before we jump into this, I just wanted to give a little bit of, so I know what'll be part of your story, and but I wanted to give a shout out to TEC Canada. It's actually where I met you originally, so we want to give them a bit of a shout out. And I've had other legendary TEC Canada folks such as David McLean and Gare Maxwell on the podcast as well. So and because I know that you're part of your story, we may or may not involve tech, but that's one of the reasons I reached out to you, Ruth Ann, because I just admired what you're doing for not only for TEC Canada, for all the members, but I mean, for the speakers and the educational side and all the work that you put in to create great leadership for businesses all across this country. So I just wanted to say that to you because I, for one, have appreciated everything that you've done for myself as being a tech speaker.
Well, thank you. And I think, tech is an amazing magnet. We were just chatting before you started recording about diversity. And what tech brings together is diversity in terms of great minds, great thinkers, thought leaders. And like you say, you're fishing from a deep pond when you go into TEC Canada, for sure.
Absolutely. So thank you for everything you do in that regard. And I said, we'll see if that becomes part of your story or not, as this unfolds today. So, so Ruth Ann, I want to know what took you from being a gosling to leaving the nest to the person that you are today. Ruth Ann Marley, what is your backstory? And when I say gosling, I mean, we're going to take you right back to your beginnings of where you came from to where you are today. What is your backstory, Ruth Ann?
Well, it's really interesting. You talk about, in this day and age and in the economy, everybody talks about being a self-made person. That they had a plan, they had a direction, they followed it, and or people that followed their heart or followed their dream. Mine is neither. mine really was as a really young child, even, and I'm talking grade 1, grade 2. I had a real call or a conviction upon my heart that made me, like you're talking about being an odd duck, made me an odd duck. And the story goes is that my parents both were atheists. My father was part of the Church of Scientology. My mother was Jewish by birth, but gave it up and walked away from that. And so my house was very filled all the time with lobsang rampa, talk about the third eye, and lots of mystical things going on. They were very seeking people. But a faith in God was something that they really disliked intensely. And so I was brought very much into that world. On Sunday mornings, I would creep out early out of my window because my parents slept late, and I would sneak off and infiltrate the Sunday school in the church in my neighborhood. And they don't, oh, well, you can go off to your parents now. I'd go, okay, and then I just go home.
So, so you're like grade 1, grade 2. So you were 7, 8 years old,
Yeah,
approximately.
yeah.
I'm going to take you back just a little bit, just to let a little bit of your story. And uh, so you were born and raised in the prairies in the Calgary area.
Sort of. My dad was responsible for setting up. Now, anybody who's a prairie person, and you are, would know about sand stores.
Mm-hmm.
And sand stores were stores and Robinson stores. So my dad set up Robinson stores across Western Canada. And they were really like the 5 and 10. They had everything in them. So it was his job to go into towns like Brandon and Stettler and some of these places across the prairies and set up the store, get it organized, and then train the local manager. And then we would move.
Oh, so you have multiple locations. So
Yep.
so at the time that you were sneaking off to Sunday school, which we're gonna dig into that. Um, was that in Calgary?
It was everywhere that we went. So I do distinctly remember that it was a lovely Anglican church in Brandon. In Stettler, it was a United Church. And when we did move to Calgary, I believe it was a United Church as well.
Okay. So so here's my question for you, Ruth. I don't know, and we had talked a little while back about this, but I thought it was a fascinating story. So here you are, 7, 8 years old, let's say at the time, and so your parents are atheist, your dad is with the Church of Scientology, and I just wanted to help explain as to what was that calling? What was, I mean, when we talked before, I said I was the one that was trying to get out of Sunday school, as my parents dragged me kicking and screaming, and you were actually sneaking out to go there, and at that age to put those pieces together, I think is fascinating to see what was that calling, what was that drive that made you think that way, because the belief system in your household was vastly different from that.
And it wasn't rebellion. And you'd think that, not naturally, like you say, you were rebelling against your parents forcing you into, like a nice little outfit and putting you in church. I was not rebelling against my parents. Again, it was one of those things where I think it was St. Augustine that says that we are all incomplete, and we are seeking to complete ourselves as we move towards God. It was like I had an inner magnet, something that was just drawing me there. I knew that's where I needed to go. There was no great philosophy in mind, nothing else. Just put my little sneakers on and away I went.
So from sneaking out every Sunday morning to Sunday school, how long was it before your parents knew that this was going on?
Actually, they didn't catch on for a long time. And when they did, they were very upset with me. They, figured I was going to get brainwashed. Who was doing this? Who was taking me? They were looking out there. You'd think it was some kind of really nasty, creepy person. No, there was no adult involved. And so, again, once they did find out I wasn't allowed to do it anymore, they make sure I stayed home and so forth. So the next rebellion was in my 20s when I was actively sought out a church community.
Right. Do you remember how you had to explain yourself as to why?
To my parents?
Yes.
I think I don't remember the exact part of it, but I because I was a very creative, artistic child, I said that they did a lot of arts and crafts.
Ah. So you're so crafty. You just figured your way out of
Think
it.
on my feet, right?
Yes, exactly. So going back to that, I mean, so you were younger, and do you remember how old when you kind of basically got caught per se, when that occurred?
I do remember it was when we moved to Calgary. So I'm going to say grade 4 by that point. So probably 10.
9, 10,
Yeah.
yeah, somewhere in there. So it was a couple of years. So tell me about your growing up more. Like we're still in the gosling phase, right?
Yeah.
So we know that you snuck away to Sunday school. And what was your growing up like outside of that in your world?
So as I said, my family was very eclectic, kind of the hippies on one side. I remember probably the greatest, and I wish I remembered the name of the concert, but my dad was working the tent at McMahon Stadium for a great big concert that hosted Janis Joplin. So she was one of the uh, featured artists. So my dad was in the tent that was for anyone who was too high on acid. He was coaching them down.
He was the bad trip guy.
Yeah, he was the bad trip guy. So I actually got to go with him, and I got to see Janis Joplin perform live. And at that time, I didn't realize how monumental it was. Everything is retrospective when you look back in your life, but that was an amazing concert. And that was the kind of life that I had, was really, my parents were always, on the edge of something. And I said to you before, being a little bit crafty and maybe a little bit artistic. I said I was drawn to theater, I was drawn to arts and to the painting world, to drawing. And also, interestingly enough, very, very compelled towards intellectual. None of my parents went to university. Most of, high school was it. And I wanted to go to university, desperate to go to university.
So you do have this little rebellious side to you, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so through your high school years, was there anything, spectacular about that phase in your life? I love the Janis Joplin story. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But growing up in high school, did you have jobs growing up? Did you work? What did you do?
So my first job was actually working at a place here in Calgary called Heritage Park, which, for people know, it's like a pioneer. It's a setup of a pioneer town. And I was 13, and I was working front of house at the little opera house. So every afternoon in the summers, they would have either a black and white movie or some type of a stage review, and there would be a live piano player. So my job was to take tickets and to welcome people, and they didn't actually pay, but there was, it felt like that. And this is another cross opportunity to meet someone famous, is that one day they said, we have a very special guest coming to the park. Ruth-Anne, would you be his guide and ride in the carriage? In those days, you had to dress in the costumes and the big hats and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So the carriage pulled up, and I got into the carriage, and it was Pierre Berton.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So now let's go back. So now Pierre Berton, of course, is, a Canadian icon, right?
Totally. Yeah.
But I have listeners from all over the world. So can you just give my listeners just a little bit of a taste of sort of, who was Pierre Berton, and what did he mean to the Canadian culture?
Pierre Berton, like you said, he's quintessentially, he was a historian. He was also had a lot of commentary about Canadian life, was really an exceptional man in terms of the level of understanding about Canada's place, Canada's history, who we are, and relative to our own progression as a nation. Mm-hmm. Just a fascinating man. I mean, I haven't really thought about him much until just now. So it's like, okay, you're going to catch me up here. Yeah.
But isn't that interesting? Because when we think about famous people, it's usually the movie stars and all those kind of things. But, in Canada, Pierre Berton was kind of a big deal, right? And here you are, 13 years old, and you get chosen to be with him in a carriage. And, what an incredible opportunity.
He was a very, very wonderful man. I mean, he loved, as I said, he was fascinated by history, which is why he came to Heritage Park. He wanted to see what, Calgary had done, and this was part of his tour in the area. And I took him to the old farmhouse because that was my favorite place to go, because they made cinnamon buns. And I said, Mr. Burton, you have to come in because they do make the best cinnamon buns. And he looked at me and he winked and he said, he's looking at my hair. He says, you'll never tell now, because he was had white hair. He says, I used to have cinnamon colored hair and I like cinnamon buns too. So let's go in. That I do remember.
That's awesome. So, so what other jobs did you have? So you worked at Heritage Park. You're 13, so you started off working at a fairly early age.
Yeah.
Any other jobs in your teenage years that really stand out?
I did a lot of volunteering work, but mostly through theater. We had an old, it was called a pump house that was down by the river. It was old pump station.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Dr. Joyce Doolittle from the University of Calgary was looking for an alternative theater space. And so she just asked anyone who would volunteer to come down and paint or sweep or clean so that we could make this into a theater space. So I did that as a volunteer. And I worked at the Hudson's Bay as the assistant to the events coordinator.
I'm seeing a theme here.
Yeah.
So what, now, how old were you when you left the nest? So it was time to get on your own and you're out of mom and dad's house. How old are you then?
I left at 17, as soon as I graduated. Yeah.
Now, was that to go to school, or was that something that you wanted to do? The way you sort of driven to say, you want your own independence?
Totally. But needed to get out.
So that, it's interesting. I left, I was on my own at 17. So, and I lived through grade 12, actually. My parents moved and I said, I'm not moving. And
that was
so,
me.
Yeah. And so I stayed on my own, had my own apartment. And that was, you were an individual. You had to cook, you had to do your laundry, you had to pay your bills and work and go to school. And I did it at 17 as well. And it's quite interesting because I look now that my kids are 17 and 20. So I look at my son at 17 and saying, would I let him live on his own? he just learned how to make scrambled eggs, for crying out loud.
Totally. We just grew up in a different time. And I was already paying my parents' rent, which when I moved out, realized that was actually their mortgage. So, what jobs I did have were able to, get me a small apartment, like a bachelor type of apartment. So, and get to university and work through university.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. So you were on your own. So you had to work, you had your own apartment, you take care of yourself, you had to go to school. There was sort of a bit of that fierce independence that you had back then. Isn't that interesting? So bring me up to speed in your story, Ruth-Anne, to sort of what's going on today. And we're gonna get into the better the pond stuff yet, but what do you do? Tell people what are you doing presently now, and anything you want to fill in the gaps from when you were leaving the nest to bringing to today.
Sure, and I think this is my third career. Maybe as I get older, I can't count them as well anymore. So this career that I'm in right now with TEC Canada is really, as I look back in retrospect, every career or every professional opportunity that I've had has allowed me or prepared me or given me a skill set to go to the next one. And not intentionally. It's always been there was always a drive or some hand or direction that was not mine that brought me to these places. But so with TEC Canada, it's a wonderful opportunity to bring together again my education background, my love for education, my love for thought leaders, for learning. I can't say enough about how fabulous my job is, because every day I talk to some of the most incredible people. And I host a webinar twice a month as well. Mm-hmm. And it's just to me, this is, this is the cat spot here. This is fantastic, right? How else, why wouldn't you want to do this?
Mhm. Exactly. You you had a background in the medical community.
Yes.
And so what took you from, being in the medical, and you can talk about that, like, your time in the medical field.
Mhm.
And so what happened there to that transition into TEC Canada? Because those are, they're pretty different worlds.
There's actually even some segues there. So my first foray into the medical business is that I started my own company. At the time, my husband was a national sales manager for a very large medical firm. And there, we could see some gaps and so forth. So I started off a company where I was an agent for 2 or 3 small companies that were starting up in Canada. So I would go out and I worked solely on commission. I would go out and I would make sales on different products. I did well enough that I had a very large corporation come to me and say, would you work for us? And so that really started my journey. And that was with a company that was selling the laryngeal mask, which is basically an anesthetic product that when you're unconscious and the anesthesiologist places it in your mouth, it allows you to be sedated and securely. So I learned a lot in that. And the wonderful thing about the medical industry is you get a lot of training. And me, I love education. So I just dove into that. So I worked for that company for a number of years. I was poached by them for another company. And my final stint in medical sales is I was a national product specialist for a cardiac and neuro product. So I was basically 200 days a year flying anywhere in Canada from Victoria to Quebec, helping neurologists and cardiologists and in servicing staff on a specific device.
Wow. I didn't know that it was that specific in that world that you lived in. So that was your own company at the time, or were you working?
No, that was a very large multinational company. And I guess the story for how it was a dream job, because here I was, everywhere in the world, going and participating and having the opportunity to help save lives,
Mhm.
to work with some of the top medical teams possible, because it was a product that was used for post-cardiac arrest. And I just had finished in servicing all of the major hospitals in Toronto and training 3 staff to be able to take over when they fired me.
They fired you.
They fired me.
They released you from your duties.
They released me. And it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And it was not really a true fault of my own. There was some white papers that had come out that showed that there was a decline in this product. So, and because I was the product specialist, there was no other avenue. They said, Ruth-Anne, this is not going to go forward. We're just going to have to let you go.
So the product doesn't sell, you're out.
You're out.
Have a nice day.
So that was my next career. So the very next day, bawling, crying, I went to a medical conference in Banff and connected with I was talking to one of the education consultants from the University of Calgary who was coordinating that conference. And I said to her, Claire, you know what? I could do your job. And she said, Ruth-Anne, you could do my job. So 2 days later, I was hired by the University of Calgary.
She wasn't replaced, was she?
No. She hired me to work with her.
Oh, okay. So what was the segue from the medical industry into TEC Canada?
Yeah, an interesting one. I love medicine. I just really am passionate about medicine and about the ability to heal and to make change. And my last work at the University of Calgary was working on pragmatic clinical trial work that focused on patient-oriented research. So what we did is, rather than the researchers deciding what they wanted to study, we would take patient profiles and say, what should we be doing? How should we be? So we had patient partners that worked with us. It was great work and created a couple of fantastic programs, worked with some exceptional people, but I was bored and lonely because I was in this little cubicle on the 3rd floor. And, you know, my only work was really an online education program for clinical trial specialists and 2 or 3 other people that I worked with. And one of the people that I had worked with in another department had been hired by TEC. And she reached out to me and she said, they've created this job, and the only person that I can think of that could do this job is you.
There's that hand coming in again.
Yeah. Like, who works with speakers? Who hires these top education? Who can put together education programs and coordinate that type of scenario? The only person that she knew was me. So that was it. A month later, I was working at TEC.
and here you are today doing that. So now, you know, this is kind of a leading question, but I mean, is TEC it? Do you even know? Is there something else bigger and grandeur along your path? Any idea?
You know what? I could not have predicted where each step took me. And so I would say definitely not the end of my life or end of my career at this point. It may expand within the TEC environment. You know, it was my 3rd anniversary at TEC on May the 1st. So in the 3 years since I started there, my job has changed almost 180. And I can see that if I stay another 3 years, it will change again quite significantly.
Well, you know, it's interesting because if you think about it, and I'm the same way, Ruth-Anne, is that I feel in order for me to keep my joy and happiness, I need to keep reinventing myself. I'm not a fan of redundancy. I'm not a fan of keeping things the same. And so I know in my own career, I keep changing it. I keep changing it up and doing things. And since I originally met you, and every time I talk to you, it's like, hey, I'm starting this new program. Hey, I'm doing this new thing. Hey, I'm like, you're always developing and you're always growing yourself every time I talk to you. And if you listen to your story, you can see that playing out, right? Yeah. And isn't that amazing how you're like, you know, it's a rolling Ruth gathers no moss. You know?
Few other things, but yeah, no moss.
Fantastic. So in being a good steward of time, I'm going to keep moving on here. So Ruth-Anne, I believe that we're all odd ducks, and I believe that we're all misfits. And can you tell me about a time when you didn't fit in? It can be positive or negative, right? But that, you know, I think that odd duck piece of us is really what makes us awesome. And this isn't bragging. This isn't about ego. This is about, you know, who you are, what makes you different. So can you think of a time when that occurred where you actually really stood out?
My entire life, Warren. You know, it's funny because, you know, you reach an age where you're connecting again with some people that I'm connecting with a few people that I went to high school with, and their comments back to me is like, you are always just this ball of energy and fire, and like, and I said, really? In high school I was like that? I was like, oh, I can't imagine. So quite honestly, Warren, I think I've always been a little bit, didn't fit quite in anywhere. In that I have the ability to be in those environments and to adapt and to move within it, but never felt completely at home in it. So, yeah.
When you say that, when you never felt really at home in it, is that something that you felt like you were always just on the outside of situations and were comfortable in that space? Or you were on the outside where you just didn't fit in and it was awkward?
I would never say I was awkward. I would say it was more of like a semi-permeable in that I would be able to go into the environment, not necessarily be one of them, but to be in that environment and then move out of it. So, you know, like I think within the medical field, there was a lot of salespeople, for example. Mm-hmm. I would never have characterized myself as a salesperson. and they were real salespeople. Every day that, I worked on a huge project that had to do with defibrillators and setting up for remote transport. And every morning they were like, Ruth Ann, you're going to knock this sale out. And I'm like, yeah, that's not how I'm thinking of it. I'm thinking of how many lives will be changed. How can I be a part of this puzzle? How can I help the hands that will save somebody? That's what I was, and I know it sounds corny, but that truly was what defined. So that is semi-permeable. Yes, I was in the world of sales, but I wasn't in the world of sales.
Right. I don't think it sounds corny at all, to be honest with you. I think it's authentic and it's real. So here's my gut feeling when I listen to you talk about that story is that you would come in to, now it wouldn't matter what situation it was, whether it was high school, whether it was in the medical community, whether it was in sales, right? You came in, right? You were the odd duck. You made a difference, right? You made an impact. You left your mark, and then you walked out.
Yep.
And you went to the next one, right? And I think that's brilliant. And again, that's my whole point of this about being the odd duck, right? Is that because of that, right? You looked at things from a different perspective. You saw it from a different view. Yeah, but it was all about how can I make a difference and have a lasting impact, not from ego, right? It wasn't look at me. It was about how can I leave my mark on the world, and then I'll do it and I leave, right? And then I'll go do it somewhere else. Right?
Yeah, I'll go to the next calling, and like I wouldn't say that it was, like you say, not purposeful, not a ladder, not an intentional. It's more like that family circus cart, where the kid goes across the street and he does 15 little loopsy loops to finally get to across the street.
Right, exactly. Right. I love it, and I, and listening to you and getting to know you, right? You're still doing that today.
Yeah.
You're still doing the same thing, right? It's playing itself out. And I believe, and we've talked about it earlier too, and there's that hand that guides you, right, along that path. It's not by your ultimate choice, you're being led. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
So can you tell me about a time, Ruth-Anne, when someone did something for you that left an impact on your life?
There's lots of them, but the first one that comes to my mind right now is a man by the name of Dave Brodsky. And Dave Brodsky was my high school drama teacher. And again, this was one of those 180 turns, is that when I went into high school and in grade 9, I was going to be an archaeologist. I already had a fairly good, like I had Latin primers. This is what I would do in the evening, is read Latin and learn Greek. And yeah, I had been doing that since grade 4. That was my little hobby, was ancient civilizations and so forth. So I went in to grade 9 thinking, okay, I'm going to focus in on the areas that will get me into archaeology. And I met Dave Brodsky, who was the drama teacher. And needless to say, I'm not an archaeologist.
You kind of threw me on the archaeology bit, but
yeah.
So what did he do for you though that really that left that mark?
What he did is he had such a passion and commitment, and it wasn't just for theater; it was for young people. Like he had this drama studio, and we would just all congregate there. He made us feel unique. He listened to us, that when other people and other adults weren't interested in who we were, he encouraged our creativity. And in both in acting and set design, I did a lot of set design. I would come in on Saturdays and build sets for him. He just had that, you wanted to do stuff because he believed in you, and truly an exceptional man.
Is there anything that he said to you that was lasting, that comes to mind, that really made a mark?
I got a terrible memory. I can't think of an exact phrase. All I can remember, though, all I can feel is his presence. I just wanted to be in the group and be supported by him and by the team in the drama department. There was just this inclusivity, this feeling of we were all odd ducks in high school, and so we were this group that was there. And interestingly enough, when I went to university, we took that odd group and went into the University of Calgary drama department, and I started up the Drama Student Society because we, 5 or 6 people came from my high school and we were there.
I'm shocked. You actually you gathered people together and you helped them and moved them forward. Geez, Ruth-Anne, there's a theme. I think you might have answered this, but I want to just take it just a little bit deeper. Is when you look at at Dave Brodsky and you talk about the things that he did, when you talk about that feeling, what do you feel that energy was when you were when you were around him, or you're around in his capacity of what you guys were doing? What was the energy? How would you best describe the energy that he put forth to you as a group?
The first word that comes is acceptance, but I think that's too passive.
Mm-hmm.
It was an encouragement. It was acceptance, but an encouragement to do more, to be better, to achieve, that you have something in you that can, and again, you see the theme, that can do something exceptional. And you do it in this sort of like almost family group.
So if you look at that, what you just said, is that a mirror image of yourself?
Well, I haven't really done that level of reflection. I don't know.
That's
Maybe.
what I see, right?
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to that's how you better the pond. It is exactly that, and maybe that was what is so attractive to you, because that's what you do for others.
Oh, thanks.
Like it's that inclusivity that I want to help other people grow, I want to nurture, I want to be a part.
That's a passion. Yeah.
That is that's who you are.
Yeah.
So interesting how you see it you saw it on the outside world, that feeling, but it's actually really what you portray.
Well, there we go. You've taught me something today, Warren. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, which is leading to my next question, and which this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the Better the Pond podcast, is what are you doing and what have you done to better the pond? And we had conversations, and I know this list is very extensive, but I really want to share this with my audience, right? Are the things that you're doing and have done in the past to make the world a better place? Because the whole idea behind the Pondcast was for having people like yourself, explain this and portray this to the world, but it's to inspire others to do the same. So I want to hear the story of everything that you've done to better the pond, Ruth-Anne.
You know what? When I wrote that list to you, is the first time I've actually written out the list of stuff. And, as you were saying, is that not many people know about this part of my life or that part of, like even in those associations that I've written down there, many of them don't know the other bits and pieces that I do. And it was almost daunting when I looked at that for myself. So I don't want to go through the whole list because that's just feels a little bit odd. But I will say that I have been, again, that deep calling within me has brought me to be invited to be chair of and to help co-found several charities, not-for-profit charities. And within that context, without going into too much detail about each charity, is that when I've gone into them or when they've invited me, is I said to them, I'm here for a finite period of time. I'm here because I want, if you invite me to be on here, I want this charity to be self-sustaining within 3 years, and then I'll leave. Mm. And that, because so many charities, and I did one in Haiti, one in Colombia. Many charities are really strongly dependent upon outside resources. Mm-hmm. And when I've gone into the communities and particularly the work that I did in Haiti, really opened my eyes to the fact that you create a very, very sick culture when it's dependent on handouts altogether. You have to, it's that whole, you have to spark people inside to realize that they can do and they can make the change within their own communities. And that's what we did in Haiti. Is the team that was down there brought a lot of the top officials, lawyers, professional people together and said, look, do you see that almost 80% of what goes on here in Haiti is all funded by external sources? And there were planes and planes and planes coming in every day full of volunteers from church groups from all over the world to come in. And I said, this is great, but why aren't you volunteering yourselves? Why aren't you helping each other? That's where the real power comes from. And so that was a really dynamic project, a very painful project, because it was very, and you and I had talked about this, it really was pushing a different mindset for them. Here in Canada, we think volunteering, yes, of course, we'll set up a food bank, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll help each other. But in impoverished countries where people have been, colonialized, they've been abused, they've been taken advantage of, volunteering doesn't feel good. It feels like you're getting set up for something. So it was really a change of mindset.
Yeah, that was when we talked about it. That's actually was really, I found it so intriguing with the way that you framed it. Was that, if I help you, or if I give you something, then I'm gonna owe you, or somebody gives me something, I'm gonna owe them.
Yep.
And I don't want to be indebted, so I just won't take it at all, right? So why would I help, right? I want to. So it was a really interesting way that you helped me really change my thinking on working with people in impoverished countries and things like that. I've worked with people in the Dominican and whatnot. So it was really fascinating when you posed it that way. So what a challenge that you must have had in order to actually, not only you're helping, but you have to change their mindset to help themselves.
Very, very, and like I say, it was painful. Many times it was super painful because it was a completely different way of seeing the world. And from that point of view, it helped me learn a lot. As you said, if you go in and you ask somebody, Warren, will you come in and help me build this? They're like, why would I do that for you? You're just trying to take advantage of me. You want me to work for free. Again, it is about colonialism. It is about slavery. It's about, these people have lived this life and have, historically it's been part of their way of thinking. So how do you overcome that was really challenging. And the only way to do it was to have top leaders do it and do it visibly. And that was, they were very proud people. Like, I don't paint houses. That's what this person does, right?
I really want you to share the story about being in the Dominican, Dominican Republic, the zip line story.
Yeah.
I thought that was, and there's another prime example of that, the hand that has led you in your life. Would you share that story?
For sure. I'll condense it down. I was in the Dominican on a vacation with my kids, and they were not too happy because the place that we were staying was kind of but I had connected with some locals who ran sort of some ecotourist activities. So I said, okay, we'll go with these people. And my kids were like, Mom, like these, I said, man, trust me. We're going to go to this zip line. So we hopped in this Jeep and we drove deep into the jungle for like almost an hour and a half. And my daughter, who was 15 at the time, was like, really? Like I could see her nails just digging into the car seat as we were going, like, where are we going? As we got deeper and deeper into the jungle. We finally got to this place, and it was this amazing zip line that went all across the area. And they also had like a monkey area where they had big open space. So the monkeys weren't in cages or anything. It was big, beautiful space. And so it was this monkey world as well. So we got out and the kids wanted to go feed the monkeys. And I said, great. So I walked up to the main building. And at the time I was wearing my t-shirt, which was Zoll Medicals. So Zoll is the cardiology company that I worked for. And the gentleman came out and he looked at my t-shirt and he said, God has sent you to me. And I said, well, it's not very often that men say that to me, but thank you so much. Why do you say that? And he said, is that the company? Do you work for this company? And I said, yes, I do. I am, cardiac specialist, da, 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 da. And he goes, well, God has sent you to me. Come here. So he led me into the main building and opened the door. And behind it was a full-on medical clinic that he had set up for all of the rural poor in that particular area. So he was a doctor and they would just come in and he said, the reason I have the zip line in the monkey jungle is so that I can afford to be able to take care of these people. And he said, the one thing I need is a cardiac defibrillator and monitor. And I said, that I can do.
I mean, listen to that story. I mean, the connections and made, I mean, it's just so much bigger, right?
Yeah.
Than going to a zip line. I mean, like the hand that led you. So, and one thing I wanted to also to say is in the pattern and the theme of listening to you is when you talk about in the work that you've done in Colombia, the work you've done in Haiti, right, and all the volunteering work that you've done with all the different organizations of how you've I don't want to speak on your behalf, but we'll see what get your thoughts on this. Is that you've come in, right, and you've been the odd duck and you put your spin on something, right, you make a difference. And then you move on. And as you said, it's finite. It's not infinite. So it's finite with that organization. You come in, you do your thing, you make a positive change and a positive impact, and then you move on and do it for someone else.
Yep. And again, it's my desire not to be a co-found with. So most of the Colombian organization particularly was two young Colombian gentlemen in their early 30s who just had a passion to give back to their community. And so they really didn't have a clue how to do things or what to do, but were very dedicated. And so that's when I came on with them, is to help them to build that structure. So it was really, I was behind them. They were, the president and, the face for it. Mm-hmm. But I set the structure, we did the CRA, we did all of that. And I said, okay, now we need to drive. This is what we, don't go off chasing this idea here. We need to finish this and build it so that it can be self-sustaining. That's our goal. We need this community to be self-sustaining. And so once that happened, I stepped back and I said, I don't want to be in the day-to-day now. Put me on as board of director for all your governance activity.
So you were never ever you were never the face of anything. You were always just back, right, guiding, helping, right? So you were Dave Brodsky.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Directing in the background,
exactly. So now looking back and looking forward of the lessons that you've learned along your journey, what does your golden pond look like, Ruth-Anne? Paint me just a picture of, you're the wise sage on the pond, right? What do you see for your future?
I'm living my best life now. And that's really what I want to make every day feel like, is that, yes, of course, there's challenges and so forth, but I don't want to say, oh, my best is yet to come. I think for me, it's integral to me to say, this is a good day. This is a good day. I'm living the best life today. It's sort of like your dog. It's like, hey, this is the best thing ever. Oh, this is the best thing. I want to live and each day like that. So in terms of what my future would be, it's not that I want to leave a legacy or I don't want to leave an impact. I just want to keep making a difference for the rest of my life. I guess that's probably it.
And Yeah, and that's sort of theme again. We're going back to this. There's that theme that weaves through, right? From being, a young girl, so you're being, independent and sneaking off and going to Sunday school, right? But all through, when you, I mean, there you are with Pierre Burton and a carriage, and you're helping and you're encouraging, and then you go into your into theater, and you're the Dave Brodsky that's having an impact in your life, right? But you've weaving that all the way through, and I can see how you would, naturally, as you've been guided and steered along the way, you're, really, it's like you're doing God's work, is how I see it.
Yep. I mean, the way I look at it is that everyone's eyes should be on Christ, but mine are the hands that are doing the work.
Right.
Yeah.
So last question for you, Ruth Ann, on the Better the Pond podcast.
No math. Don't give me math.
If we were there's a funny story behind this, but if you were standing on the top of a mountain,
yeah,
and the whole world was intensely listening to you,
Ew.
What would you say?
Wow. The first thing that comes to my mind is the Beatitudes. And I'd have to memorize that one, or else I'd have to read it. It's, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are the humble. That would be what I would want to say.
There you go. The whole now, because you're on the podcast, the whole world is listening.
Oh no.
So there you have it, folks. It was a great time here today with Ruth Ann Marley. And so if anyone wants to connect with you, where do they find you, Ruth Ann?
They can, probably the best way is through TEC Canada, is to reach out to me there. And so just rmarley@techcanada.com.
Okay. And anything on the social platforms?
Sure. I'm on Facebook, and it's just Ruth Ann Marley with a hyphen and an E.
A hyphen and an E. And you're on LinkedIn as well. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
They can find you on LinkedIn as well. And so if they want to find you even through TEC Canada, so just techcanada.com, is that?
That's right. Yeah.
Correct? That's where they can find you. Perfect. Well, you know what? Thank you, Ruth Ann. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate so much that you're that odd duck and the impact that you are, that you had in the world, and you've done so much, and you're so inspiring, and you're so generous, and you're such a lovely human being, and you've left a mark on my life as well.
Thank you, Warren. Back at you.
So this is Warren Barry, and I'm flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you, Ruth Ann.
Thanks, Warren.